What's good, y'all? Elite Live Streams. We back with another one. How you guys doing out there? Welcome back to another Elite Live Streams. It's been a busy weekend, but we back with another video, another great live stream, another great holiday to celebrate. Rest in peace to the legend, the elder, the ancestor, the icon, Dr. Martin Luther King. We're going to talk about it today. We're going to talk about Martin Luther King. We're going to talk about his life, his activism. We're going to go through his history. We're just going to talk about everything Martin Luther King based. I feel like this is just an important topic. And this is something that I just enjoy talking about. You feel me? I love history. I love talking about foundational Black American history. And I enjoy getting on here and adding this to my catalog, right? This is a part of a catalog. We're building a catalog here. And so a lot of the content that I want to create and the, videos that I want to make, the documentaries that I'm working on are all based on history. And of course, today's a very important day. A lot of people have the day off, of course, but we're going to take some time to pay homage to someone who made it possible for all of us as foundational Black Americans to be here today. We are the dream, okay? Wanted to start off with something very positive. You feel me? We are the dream. We are what Dr. Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, Muhammad Ali, we are what they wanted, okay? We are the ones who are keeping the legacy alive. We are the ones who have took those resources that they created for us and went even further. You know what I'm saying? Of course, as a society and as a community, we definitely have things that we're striving for, and we definitely want more. But we also have to take some time, right, to pay homage to those who paved the way for us. And so that's what I'm here to do today, right? We're going to go through it all. We're going to have a little fun. We're going to do a history lesson. All right. It's all going to start right here on Elite Media when we just, get into it, man, because this is a man who is deserving, right? You could talk about anything today, right? We could talk about whatever, but we're going to make sure that we stay on code and speak about someone who is deserving of this, all right? Who is deserving of this type of historical references, who is deserving of a nice deep dive and a ode to respect. You feel me? A salute, if you will, to a legend. You know what I'm saying? So let me put this mic down because we're working on that. And we're going to get into it, right? So, you know what I'm saying? I thought it was important, just to make sure that we talk about a man who went from Georgia all the way to the White House, man. You know what I'm saying? I think it's important that, as a collective, right, as Black Americans, we always speak about our history and gatekeeping our history, but we also have to make sure that we are making it clear and reminding everyone to never forget the people who are iconic in our community and those who are very important to what we are doing and how we've been able to accomplish what we're doing today, right? And so that's why it was important for me to, speak on my brother Martin Luther King, you know what I'm saying? Salute to him, you know what I'm saying? The civil rights activist, the Baptist minister, and who was a leader of the civil rights movement from 1955 until his assassination in 1968. You feel me? So we gonna talk about it, man. You know what I mean? A brother who had so many dreams and who had such a great mind. You feel me? Who was out here doing the work that was necessary for us, man. A church leader who took it, like I said, from a very, very real background all the way to the White House. You feel me? And I think it's important that a lot of people understand, what it took and where it started. You know what I'm saying? And so that's what we're going to do. We're going to start, right? We're going to start with what? The Mary's Cafe sit-in 1950, okay? The Mary's Cafe sit-in 1950. Now, this is the first documented, okay, activist that Dr. Martin Luther King took part in, and I thought it was important that we bring up the start of where it started. 1950, guys, you know what I'm saying? It's incredible, just for us to speak on the history of this, but Mary's Cafe sit-in, all right? So let's talk about it, okay? So on Sunday, June 11th in 1950, Dr. Martin Luther King and a classmate at Crozer Seminary and housemate Walter McCall and their dates, Doris Wilson and Pearl Smith, attended church services in Merchantville, all right? After which they stopped at a tavern, Mary's Cafe in Maple Shade, for beers. The foursome were left waiting without anyone approaching them for service, not unexpectedly, right? So of course at this time, there was a big time where we saw, of course, that Black Americans could not integrate. They were not getting the same service as a white American would, and especially in the South, right? So right now they're already speaking on, right, of course, them going out on a date night just normally, but they understood what time it was, right? Because of course, at this time, you have to expect that type of treatment because, of course, this was the climate. And mind you, like I try to tell people all the time, people really act like this was so long ago, okay? This was in 1950, y'all. This was not that long ago. So when we speak on the history of Black Americans, when we speak on the foundational Black American and how much we've dealt with, people always try to act like it was so long ago, all right? 1950 was not that long ago, okay? They were already dealing with this, and this is, like I said, the first documented, all right, sit-in for Martin Luther King, all right? Again, Mary's Cafe sit-in in 1950, all right? So let's continue, right? A friend's father and King and McCall's landlord, Jethro Hunt, had warned them that Black people were not welcome at Mary's, and King replied to the effect of maybe they need to go so they could start to go anywhere they wanted, right? So, of course, Dr. King, he had some cojones, right? He wasn't afraid to go in there and sit in on what they had going on and say, you know what? Like, I'm about to just go ahead and enjoy. Like, we're going to have to see, because if they can't deal with Black folks patronizing their businesses, then maybe they shouldn't be in the community, which is a great perspective to have, right? So King replied, right? And then so the seminarians had opted for Mary's Cafe with full knowledge of its reputation. After waiting without service, McCall approached the bar, right? So this was his friend, right? His friend McCall that he, went ahead and joined in with, right? So McCall asked the bartender at Mary's Cafe and owner Ernest Nichols for a packaged goods beer for takeaway. Nicholas refused, explaining that he could not sell packaged goods on a Sunday or any day after 10 p.m. by law. McCall then requested 4 glasses of beer, to which Nicholas replied, "No beer, mister. Today is Sunday." Nicholas would claim they sought him to violate New Jersey's blue law, a restriction common in South Jersey and Pennsylvania as a remnant of the influences of the Quakers' roots, right? So, as you can already see, there's conflict, right? There's him going up to the bar because they're already telling him, hey, we can't serve you guys. Then he says, we can't serve you guys because it's a Sunday. McCall then asks for it to go, and they say, no, we will not serve you. He also asked, hey, man, well, then can we get some glasses and sit in? And they're also saying, no, buddy, we cannot serve you on a Sunday, right? So, right, it continues to escalate, right? Nicholas refused the group even ginger ales and reportedly stated the best thing would be for you to leave. King and company met refusal with refusal and remained in their seats, as was their right per New Jersey's 1945 anti-discrimination law, right? So during this time, right, we had already saw that there was a huge wave, right, of discrimination laws that were going across America because this was during Jim Crow. So, of course, there was still a lot of segregation. And obviously, some places had to abide by these laws, right? So, let me take this down so you can get your boy full screen. But it was something that I think was very important at this time, because there was definitely a huge understanding that, hey, man, if we go into a business, like his seminary school told him, hey, if you go in this business, you better be careful, because what could happen is they could treat you however they want. And this was a huge part of what happened at these times, right? So in 1945, two significant anti-discrimination laws emerged. Alaska's Equal Rights Act, the first in the U.S. to ban discrimination in public spaces for all races, championed by Elizabeth Petrovich, and New York's Ives versus Quinn Act, the first state law prohibiting employment discriminations based on race, creed, color, or national origin, creating the State Commission Against Discrimination. These landmark laws set precedents for later civil rights legislations by outlawing discrimination practices in public accommodations and jobs, establishing early state-level enforcement mechanisms, right? So, as we're already starting to see, right, the overall understanding that at this time, right, there were already things in place. So Martin Luther King coming in 1950, right, 5 years later, into cafe and sit-in, right, there's already going to be some smoke from him, because he understands that this 1945 anti-discrimination law had already, went through, right, in which guaranteed non-discrimination by race in public accommodations. Nichols stomped out, right, and returned with a gun, standing outside, firing into the air, reporting and shouting, "I'd kill for less." Fearing for their lives, the four activists ran from the tavern. The group went to Maple Shade Police Department, where officers refused to file their complaint, okay? King and McCall contacted Ulysses Simpsons Wiggins, the president of the Camden County branch of the NAACP, who helped them successfully file a police report. The New York Times confirms that the complaint was against Ernest Nichols, a white tavern owner in Maple Shade, New Jersey, and said that he had refused to serve Black students and their dates in June 1950 and had threatened them by firing a gun in the air. All right. So look, this used to happen consecutively all the time. All the time we would see this going on, especially during, like I said, these early times where anti-discrimination laws were going on, right? When you also had Jim Crow going on. So all this turmoil, Martin Luther King is in the mix, y'all. All right. He's completely in the mix, doing what he has to, right, to back up his stance and to go out in his activism, to be boots on the ground and making sure that, hey, man, regardless of what's going on, I'm still going to make sure that we're letting them know, hey, man, this ain't going to be happening on my watch. You feel me? So that was, Dr. Martin Luther King, he had big honors, you feel me? So look, we'll continue. Nichols was charged with disorderly conduct and a violation of an anti-discrimination law. He was found guilty and fined $50. However, the racial discrimination count was dismissed. In a statement submitted in the spirit of assisting the prosecutor, Nichols' attorney noted, Mr. Nichols claimed that this act was not intended as a threat to his colored patrons. The colored patrons, on the other hand, while they admit that the gun was not pointed at them or any of them, seemed to think that it was a threat. All right. So look, this is how it would always happen, right? There was always a shift, right? They would shift the blame, right? You had Dr. Martin Luther King and his friends coming after a date night to patronize Mary's Cafe in 1950. The owner refuses to serve them. And then you have the situation that happens here, right? So obviously, right, we're seeing now that this is kind of just a pattern, right, where at that point, at that time, they couldn't even file a police report. They couldn't even go to the police station, right? As foundational Black Americans couldn't go to the police station in their community in New Jersey, file a police report to, file a complaint against this restaurant that was clearly discriminating against them, right? So naturally, it sometimes really upsets me when people try to, compare the plight of what foundational Black Americans went through and everybody else. It's just not the same. You feel me? There's a huge difference from this, right? So King cited that this was an incident, saying that it was a formative step in his commitment to a more just society. The Mary's Cafe sit-in demonstrated the power of a nonviolent civil disobedience, right? Nicholas' reaction in retrieving a weapon and discharging it to scare the group or summon his guard dog to young people's refusal to leave unserved showed King's potency of such tactics. This sit-in is believed to be the first deployment of the nonviolence and civil obedience tactics which would distinguish King's activism and legacy, right? So like I said, this was really the first actual, documented on record of him going out and participating in a non-violent, right, protest, right, and sit-in to go against something that he felt was a discrimination, right? So from my perspective, I think it's very important that we speak on that, right? Hold on one second. Got happy water. All right. So now let's continue as we stay hydrated. So next, right? Next, we will go in, right? So now, 5 years later, right? After, King is doing his thing, he's raising his profile, the Montgomery bus boycott, right? This was a major event, right? In our history as foundational Black Americans. When this happened, this was something that changed the trajectory. It was one of the first, right, real, I would say, collectively drawn movements that really went mainstream. It swept across the entire country. And this is a time before, any Instagram or social media. So these were like real actual times, right? And so we just had the passing of Claudette Colvin, right? She was 87 and she was one of the first, right, to actually participate in a bus boycott, right? Not giving up her seat for a white man who was in the bus at the time, right? And this is what sparked Rosa Parks, right, to be the one who would actually be the one who would spark this entire movement, right? So let's talk about it, because this was actually an integral part of what we talk about when I say that Black Americans, specifically foundational Black Americans, how we have been able to constantly create and orchestrate movements and as well activism through a collective forum, right? We are the trendsetters, and naturally everything that we do sets the trends, right? So let's talk about this, right? Let's talk about it, man, because this, like I said, was an iconic situation, right? So the Dexter Avenue Baptist Church was influential in the Montgomery foundational Black American community, as the church's pastor, Dr. Martin Luther King, became known for his oratorical preaching in Montgomery and surrounding regions, right? In March of 1955, Claudette Colvin, who I just spoke about, right? Claudette Colvin, let's talk about her. A Black schoolgirl in Montgomery refused to give up her bus seat to a white man in a violation of Jim Crow laws, right? A violation of this, right? So what were Jim Crow laws, right? For anybody in the back, right? Just so you guys can make sure that we're all on the same page. The Jim Crow laws were state and local laws introduced in the southern United States in the late 19th and early 20th centuries that enforced racial segregation. The origin of the term Jim Crow is obscure, but probably refers to the slave songs that referred to an African dance called Jump Jim Crow. The last of the Jim Crow laws were generally overturned in 1965 by Voting Rights Acts of 1965. Formal and informal racial segregation policies were present in other areas of the United States as well, even as several states outside of the South had banned discrimination in public accommodations and voting, right? So that's why we always say that even during this time after Jim Crow, and once things were supposedly gone into law, there were still states and multiple people who were participating in still those same ideologies, right? You just can't turn off the racism. You just can't turn off the generational racism and trauma, right? That a lot of these people participated in even after 1965. And like I said, Claudette Colvin just passed away, right? She was 87 years old. Okay. So wasn't that long ago, guys. A lot of these people who were a part of this movement and who participated in this movement are still alive till this day, right? Southern laws were enacted by white dominated state legislators to disenfranchise and remove political and economic gains made by foundational Black Americans during the Reconstruction era, such continuing the racial segregation, which was also supported by the Lily White movement. All right, guys. So let's keep it clear here that this is exactly what happens and goes on in multiple cases, right? That there was always going to be an incentive for them to always find a way to create systems and to go out of their way to show that, hey, we are in control, whether these laws are enacted or not. We are going to do whatever we want to do, and we do not have to abide by any laws, right? We don't have to abide by anything that they're telling us that we have to do. We're going to do what we want to do. And that's terrible because that was hell for a lot of our ancestors, right? So look, we'll continue, right? We just talked about Claudette Colvin, right? So on December 1st, 1955, Rosa Parks was arrested for refusing to give up her seat on a city bus. These incidents led to the Montgomery bus boycott, which was urged and planned by Edgar Nixon and led by Dr. King. All right. So this was a part of what we like to talk about, which is the power of the foundational Black American dollar, right? Our economy, when we can take that away and boycott certain things, say, hey guys, we're not going to spend here. Hey guys, we're going to take our money and invest it back in our community. This is a lot of where those roots started during that 1955 Montgomery bus boycott, right? This crippled, right, the bus system at that time because the patrons, many of them being foundational Black Americans at that time, were the ones who were patronizing and as well paying to be on the bus. So if the majority of the people who are riding the bus say one day that we're not, that is going to cripple your business. And that's exactly what happened, right? The other ministers asked him to take a leadership role because his relative newness to the community, leadership made it easier for him to speak out. King was hesitant, but decided to go and do so if no one else wanted to, right? Sometimes you are called to do things that are necessary for the betterment of not only just your foundational. Like I said, this was the turning point, right? This was the turning point where, like I said, a congregation of people got behind Dr. Martin Luther King and said, you're going to be the one because you are young enough, you have a fresh face, you are new to this, and as well, you are going to be able to speak out better than we would be able to. And that's what I'm saying. There was foresight. There was a collective that everyone worked together to say, you know what, Malcolm, we see what you're doing. We want to get behind that. All right. So listen, the boycott lasted for 385 days, and the situation became so tense that King's house was bombed. All right. King's house was bombed for this. Okay. Can you guys believe that? All right. The situation got so bad that Dr. Martin Luther King's house was bombed. All right. This is just, I mean, like I said, man, when you're out here speaking out, when you are taking a stance against white supremacy and the power structure of racism, you're going to be able and you're going to put your neck out there. There are going to be people who naturally are going to want to take you out. And this, like I said, was a pivotal time in 1955 where naturally a lot of people had a big problem with them. And so they were going to go out of their way to make sure that they could stop that movement as much as they could, right? And so they literally tried to bomb his house, right? Bomb his house, y'all. I don't know how these things could happen and where, the love would be, you know what I'm saying, for somebody who's going out here risking his life, right? Putting his life on the line, putting his family's life on the line for the betterment of his people. And his house is literally being bombed. Like the nerve that it takes of a man to be able to be that influential and to be able to have that much heart to say, you know what, I'm going out here and I'm doing this for my people. You know what I mean? Regardless of the outcome, right? Dr. Cream was arrested for traveling 30 miles per hour in a 25 mile per hour zone and was jailed, which drew the attention of national media and increased King's public stature. The controversy ended when the U.S. District Court issued a ruling in Browder versus Gale that prohibited racial segregation on Montgomery public buses. All right. King's role in the bus boycott transformed him into a national figure and one of the best known spokesmen of the civil rights movement. And like I said, during that time, 1955, this was the pivotal time and what changed everything for Dr. King. They put him on the world stage, a national stage. It showed everyone what a collective movement the foundational Black Americans can create. 385 days this boycott went on. They did not participate in use of any of the buses. Like I said, this crippled the industry to the point where people literally were bombing Martin Luther King's house. Okay? This was the risk that this man took for us as foundational Black Americans. All right? And mind you, the collective, right? Everyone getting behind him, like I mentioned, right? The ministry and different people from different factions of the civil rights movement getting behind Martin and saying, hey, man, we like your fresh face. We know that you'll be able to speak on the issues that we cannot. We want to put you on the forefront. And that is exactly what pushed him into that national recognition and then him becoming one of the main people in this Montgomery bus boycott, right? This is 1955, guys, all right? This is still 10 years from the Civil Rights Bill being passed, all right? This is in the thick of it, right? When it is at its worst, okay? When I told you guys, okay, we already have an outline, right? It starts with Mary's Cafe in 1950, right? New Jersey, he goes out there with his friends, they boycott, boom. All right, cool, that's one. Then 5 years later, it goes to what? The Montgomery bus boycott of 1955. The one, like I said, that changed everything, right? We just talked about Claudette Colvin, who was the spark, right? Who sparks Rosa Parks. Rosa Parks joins the same movement and says, you know what? I'm not moving, right? You're done. We're not moving. Take me to jail. She goes to jail. Dr. King creates a boycott of the bus services in Montgomery for 385 days, man. This is what I talk about when I mean a true collective, a collective front, everyone working together and understanding that this is for the betterment of our people. We will go as long as it takes to not have to participate if we're going to make a message felt. And that's why when I saw nowadays, right, we had the Target boycott, right? The DEI. We said, okay, Target, y'all want to change up? We're boycotting. And mind you, there are people who still patronize, Target, whatever. But I haven't been back to Target since. I haven't been back to Walmart. I haven't been back to any of these entities, any of these huge corporations who do not support foundational Black Americans. There is an incentive for us to always collectively stay on code when we see people doing and acting in a way that supports the white power structure and white supremacy. And it started with our ancestors like Dr. Martin Luther King, right? It is important for us to be the dream, like I said earlier. It is important for us to make sure that we hold the line because these guys fought so hard for us. Dr. King had his house bombed, all right, for a boycott of something that we all know is wrong. Rather than fix it, they would rather kill you. Let that sit in your mind. Rather than fix it, they would rather kill him. Let that sit in your mind, okay? Because that is the type of time that they were on, all right? So we will continue, right? King's role in the boycott transformed him into a national figure, right? We talked about this. It was a real thing, right? So now we move to the Southern Christian Leadership Conference in 1957. All right, we move in. This is 2 years later. All right, Dr. King, Ralph Abernathy, Fred Shuttlesworth, Joseph Lowery, and other activists founded the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, or the SCLC. The group was created to harness the moral authority and organizing power of the Black church to conduct nonviolent protests in the service of civil rights reform. All right? So listen to me. This is why I think when we just saw Drewski making fun of the Black church and what it has become, why so many people agreed with it. Because this, what I just spoke on right now, was the real root of the foundational Black American church and what it used to represent in our community. How it was a root for the fight and also the activism of civil rights in the United States of America. There was a stronghold and a safety net that was built inside of these institutions in our communities, and for it to become what it has become today, right? So predatory, right? So false idol, right? The Louis bags and the Christian Dior, yeah, we see it. But where's the activism, right? Where's the help to the community, right? Where's the giving back? That's why it's so important to always pay attention, right? When we saw where the roots were, right? So let's start again so I can make sure that you guys understand the roots. In 1957, the Southern Christian Leadership Conference was founded by Dr. King, Ralph Abernathy, Fred Shuttlesworth, Joseph Lowery, and other activists, okay? The group was created to harness the moral authority and organizing power of the Black church to conduct nonviolent protests in service of the civil rights reform. This group was inspired by the crusades of the evangelist Billy Graham, who befriended Dr. King, as well as the national organizing in the friendship founded by the King's allies, Staley Livingston and Ella Baker. All right. So this was a collective front. Like I mentioned, a collective front. There's not a lot of people, in my opinion, nowadays who understand their role, right? I don't got to be the leader, man. I don't got to be the leader, okay? I'm here to contribute what I have to whatever the movement may be. And if it aligns with my ideology and the code that I stand for, then I will 100% support. I do not care about who's the leader, who's this or that. When it comes to our lineage, it is very important that we are on code and that we are staying locked in step with one another. Using what? The institutions that are cores to our community. And that's why when I always reference the Black church, and a lot of people have felt a certain way about the Black church, yeah, it's because we've gotten so far away from what it actually used to represent, right? and I will make sure that I reference this again. The group was created to harness the moral authority and organized power of the Black church to conduct nonviolent protests in the service of a civil rights reform. What is going on right now in the foundational Black American community? What are we fighting for, right? We are fighting for an anti-Black hate crime bill, right? That's what we're fighting for. We're fighting for reparations. We are also fighting for the land grants that are entitled to our ancestors. So, collectively, right, as Black Americans, our goal is to figure out our moral compass. How are we able to fully connect the dots from here all the way across the country? We're using platforms to be able to connect with one another and to be able to reach out, take notes, and say, hey, man, this is what I've been going through. Do you guys agree? Are we on the same page with this? Are we on the same page with that? Are we deciding to protest? Are we sitting it out? All these things have been discussed. Now it is time to clean up the church. I always talk about divine timing, right? And it couldn't be more great timing that Drewski figures out a skit that can go ahead and permeate through the culture for everyone to reevaluate the role that the church plays in the foundational Black American community, which this is from the start. The civil rights movement was based and planned right in these churches right here in America. So y'all help me understand the direct correlation, right? Whether it was even Malcolm X, his collective movement and activism, civil rights planning was in a mosque. Okay? So regardless, these four walls that people have chosen to collectively believe in, we need to understand that. Let's go. All right. So salute to Abdullah Muhammad. I hope I got your name right. Abdul Ali Muhammad. Thank you, brother. Dr. Martin Luther King never said that he was foundational Black American. In other words, FBA. Brother, I think it's quite clear that he is foundational Black American. Okay. We already know his origin, where he was born. We know his family lineage. We don't even need to argue that, bro. We don't need to argue that, brother. We already know that Dr. King was foundational Black American. I don't think that's even a debate, bro. Like, salute to you, brother Abdul Ali, but you're wrong. You're wrong. Like, you're just wrong, bro. The history speaks to that. Stop telling to put FBA labor on every. Mr. Muhammad, I'm not sure if you could take a moment to collectively rewrite your comment, and then I could better understand what you're trying to say, just so I could try to get an understanding of what you're saying, sir. A lot of people don't want to be no damn American. Okay, that's fine, Mr. Muhammad. If you don't want to be American, that's fine, bro. I'm not talking about you though. We're talking about Dr. King here. So, Mr. Muhammad, I hope that you figure it out, bro, or whatever you're on. But we're talking about Dr. King here. We're talking about his history on Martin Luther King Day. We are paying respects to the ancestor who paved the way for a foundational Black American like myself, and that's what we're doing over here. I don't know what you're on, but like you can be on that, bro. I don't. All right, Mr. Muhammad. Yeah, let me continue, guys. All right. Mr. Beat Active. Let me go ahead and explain to you that a lot of Black American lineage is from Europe, my brother. That's a part of our lineage, bro. Like it's very different. Like I think you just don't understand. That's okay. I'm sorry, bro. You have a nice day too, Mr. Muhammad. I think you're wrong. And unfortunately, I hope that, you go in peace. Thank you so much. Yeah, but let's continue, right? So we were talking about, before we got distracted, right? We were talking about the coalition, right? The Southern Christian Leadership Conference, right? That's what we're talking about, right? And we were talking about the importance of how the Black American church and the role that it played in the civil rights movement, right? We were talking about that, right? So let's continue, right? Harry Wachtel joined King's legal advisor, Clarence B. Jones, in defending the four ministries of the SCLC in a libel case. The case was litigated about a newspaper advertisement that said, "Heed their rising voices," right? So listen, this is a part of what I say when it comes to the white propaganda and how they would use the newspapers and whatever form of media that they had at the time to sabotage and to talk down on the civil rights movement, right? So this is what this is talking about, right? This was an article, right, in the local newspaper advertisement, right? So basically, this was probably some special interest group that was paid to put an ad in the newspaper speaking out against this collective group, the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, the SCLC, right? To heed their rising voices, right? So Wachtel founded a tax-exempt fund to cover the suit's expenses and assist in the civil rights movement through more effective fundraising, right? King served as an honorary president of this organization, named the Gandhi Society for Human Rights, right? So at the time, we all already know what was going on, how these things were happening, how Martin Luther King was directly influenced by Gandhi, right? We already know how he really bought into the non-violent protest way of going about things, right? So I think it's important that there's always something to be said about that, right? So Be Active, salute to Be Active. Unfortunately, Mr. Be Active, we don't have these conversations here. I don't argue with people who do not already understand the history, my brother. We've already discussed the lineage and ancestry of a lot of foundational Black Americans. There's many a video that you can find. I have a video on my channel that speaks about my lineage and my family tree. I don't have to go back and forth with you about, things that are just not important, my brother. So salute to you. We will continue. All right. So once they founded that fundraising fund, right, that they named in the name of Gandhi, right, in 1962, King and the society produced a document that called on President Kennedy to issue an executive order to deliver a blow for civil rights as a kind of second Emancipation Proclamation, right? So let's talk about that, right? The second Emancipation Proclamation is the term applied to an envisioned executive order that Martin Luther King and other leaders of the civil rights movement called JFK to issue. As the Emancipation Proclamation was an executive order by President Abraham Lincoln to free the slaves being held in states at war with the Union. The envisioned second Emancipation Proclamation was to use the powers of that executive office to strike a severe blow to segregation, right? So this was important. This was integral, right, in the growth and understanding of how Martin Luther King wanted the movement to move forward against segregation, right? And we just going in, man. I mean, we doing the history, y'all. We are not playing, bro. Everything is facts at Elite Media, bro. We don't mess around with this. We always try to make sure that we reference everything with facts, because at Elite Media, we bring receipts, man. We don't mess around with this, all right? So the FBI, under written directive from Attorney General Robert Kennedy, began tapping King's telephone in the line in the fall of 1963. Now, this is very important, guys. this is when the government started their surveillance on Dr. King, right? 1963, okay? They started that surveillance because, like we just mentioned, Dr. King got some real money behind him. They had a fund to be able to put these certain laws into legislation. He brings up the Second Amendment, right? He wants to have a second Emancipation Proclamation, right? He brings us all the way to the top. And that's what I mean when he started to leverage all of his status and all of his support to actual real legislation. And that's the point, right? That's what I say when I talk to people, outside of, YouTube, because y'all just be on the internet. I'll be out here. When you talk to people, you tell them, hey, man, like right now I'm doing this, but it's actually a plan to be able to leverage it to something tangible, right? And that's what Black Americans always talk about. We talk about tangibles, things that we can actually grasp on, things that are actually going to benefit us, right? And so when I come, I say, hey, I do my YouTube channel and I have my content that I create, but it is to grow the status so that eventually I can leverage what I do on here to things that I want to do in real life, right? So that's what Dr. King did. He said, okay, bet. If I understand how the game works and I need the money and support and the legal backing to be able to reach the level of legislation like all these other groups, I need to start doing that. And once he started to do that, I just told you guys what happened. In 1963, Robert F. Kennedy started tapping his telephone, okay? Kennedy was concerned that the public allegations of the communists in the SCLC would derail the administration's civil rights initiative, right? And that's what they started to do. They started to label, right, these people and organizations who were going out of their way to align themselves with the civil rights of foundational Black Americans. Then they said, hold up. We now have to classify them as something, and we will classify them as commies, right? We'll classify them as this. So then once we can go ahead and say, hey, this is what, they are, we can now tap their phones. We can now come at them aggressively to make it seem like they are a threat to our national security. Meanwhile, what they're actually doing is fighting for civil rights for foundational Black Americans. And like I said, this has always been the manipulation tactics and the understanding that they have in order to what? Demonize and create a villain of the foundational Black American community, right? So we will continue, right? Because this is really what was going on, man. I mean, I'm not lying. These are just facts. So he warned King to discontinue these associations and felt compelled to issue the directive that authorized the FBI to wiretap King and other SCLC leaders. FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover fielded the civil rights movement and investigated the allegations of a communist infiltration, all alleged, right? Like I said, all alleged. They have to create a level of, hey, these guys are up to something. We can't necessarily say, so we're going to label them as communists, and then we can be able to come at them aggressively, right? When no evidence emerged to support this, the FBI used the incidental details caught on a tape for the next 5 years as part of its COINTELPRO program in attempts to force King out of his leadership program. Now, what did we just see the last couple of days? Didn't we see someone who came out here claiming to be a part of the Black Panther organization? Did we not see this person come out here and make threats against the national security and ICE? Did we not see that this person has been called out with a lot of questionable past? COINTELPRO, guys, right? We just spoke on it. Okay, so let me go ahead and speak on this first. Let's go ahead and talk about it. But first, let's cook Beat Active because he feels the need to go out of his way to say these things. Well, I mean, it means that you can't call King and FBA, bro. We're not gonna do this, Beat Active. We're past that, bro. You're just talking to yourself now. I'm gonna let you talk to yourself in the chat. Okay, so what is COINTELPRO, do you ask? Let me go ahead and inform you. It was a series of covert and elite projects conducted between 1956 and 1971 by the United States Federal Bureau of Investigation, aimed at surveilling, infiltrating, and discrediting and disrupting American political parties, organizations, and the FBI perceived as subversive. Okay? Understand this, all right? So groups of individuals that were targeted by the FBI: the Communist Party of the US, anti-Vietnam War organizations, activists in the civil rights and Black Power movements. Okay? This is who they were targeting. So when we talk about COINTELPRO, right? When we talk about infiltration of people's organization, they had already been planning and strategically making sure that they could infiltrate into Dr. King's organizations so that he could be able to be taken down as the leader because of the motion that he had during this time, right? And mind you, like we said, this was in 1957 and 1962. They started to create the fund. And in 1963, literally the next year, they said, we got to tap this dude's phones. We got to put COINTELPRO on this dude because he is a problem and a threat, right? He had too much motion that they had to start creating these systems and COINTELPRO to take out our brother. All right? Because I almost said something crazy. I had to stop myself, man, because we're on YouTube, you know? But it's crazy, man, because this is what was going on, right? So look, King was believed in that organization. Hold on. King believed that organized nonviolent protests against the system of Southern segregation, known as Jim Crow, would lead to the extensive media coverage of the struggle of foundational Black Americans' equality. All right? This is what he was speaking about, okay? It was about making sure that he could use this specific way to protest, and I will be able to take that and it will be able to draw a certain level of attention that's necessary for our people to get the recognition that is necessary for these laws to be passed for civil rights. All right. He understood that at this point, the media and the way that it was portrayed had to happen. I have to be able to create a nonviolent stature to make them look even worse so that we can actually get some attention so people can see this and say, oh my God, look what they're doing to these foundational Black Americans. We need to make sure that this doesn't happen. And so it sparks more foundational Black Americans to go out and participate in these nonviolent protests. And it goes nationwide, it goes worldwide, because foundational Black Americans are the trendsetters. We are the ones who set the trends. We are the ones who fight for those who cannot fight for themselves. We are the ones who put it out on the line, all right? So we must continue, right? King organized and led marches for Black rights to vote, desegregation, labor rights, and other basic civil rights. Most of these rights were successfully enacted into law with the Civil Rights Act of 1954 and the 1965 Voting Rights Act. The SCLC used tactics of nonviolent protest with success by strategically choosing the methods and places of which protests were carried out. There were often dramatic standoffs with segregationists, authorities who sometimes turned violent. And that was a lot of what would go on, right? We already talked about what would happen. We saw the videos, the straight carnage that was put onto foundational Black Americans during this time, man. We seen that. You know what I'm saying? It was tough, man. It was tough. All right. And it's crazy because it just keeps going. Like, I wish I could just read everything, but it just keeps going, man. I could keep going, and I will. You know what I'm saying? Because why not? All right. Why not? All right. So in 1958, he was attacked. Right? He was attacked on September 20th, 1958. King was signing copies of his book, Stride Towards Freedom, in Blumstein's department store in Harlem, when Izola Curry, a mentally ill Black woman who thought King was conspiring against her with communists, stabbed him in the chest with a letter opener, which nearly impinged on the aorta. King received first aid police officers and he survived. All right. King went under surgery and he remained hospitalized for weeks. Curry was later found mentally incompetent and stood trial. All right. So this is what was going on, man. There was a lot of people with psychosis. There's people attacking him. And I'm gonna be real with you. It's very easy to say that she had psychosis, but you know, that could have been an agent. Just like we talked about earlier, right? The COINTELPRO and what went on, man, that could have been an agent. We know that. We know that could have been an agent. That could have been anybody who, you know, they want to create the storyline about and say, oh, this woman was, you know, mentally ill and she attacked him and stabbed him in the chest with a letter opener. That sound like government activity to me. All right. So look, we fast forward now. So Atlanta sit-ins, come on, man. In 1959, after being based in Montgomery for 5 years, King announced his return to Atlanta. In Atlanta, King served under his death as co-pastor with his father at the Ebenezer Baptist Church. Georgia Governor Ernest Van Diver expressed open hostility towards King's return. He claimed that whenever MLK has been there, he has followed his wake is a wave of crimes. Now listen, man, this is what will be going on, bro. It was in our own community, man. A lot of jealousy, a lot of people who didn't like Brother Martin. They didn't like how they was moving. So naturally, when they would come into town, they would say that it was all this going on, crime and whatever else, which was just a lie. Okay. So look, on May 4th, 1960, King drove to Emory University when police stopped him. King was cited for driving without a license because he had not yet been issued a Georgian license. King's Alabama license was still valid, and Georgia law did not mandate any time limit for issuing a local license. King paid a fine, but was unaware his lawyer agreed to a plea deal that included probation. All right. So look, this is as well how they will get you, right? We talk about how probation in America is a system that's set up for foundational Black American men to be able to constantly stay in the system, right? To stay in that system of prison, to stay in that system of jail, right? That's a part of it. Probation is just a constant cycle. You're in and out of jail because they can get you on any infraction, right? And so naturally, King was very surprised that there was a deal that was set with him having to include probation when naturally he says that the mandate, it was not issued, right? So meanwhile, he had been acting to desegregate a business and public spaces, organizing Atlanta sit-ins from March 1960 onward. The movement that King participated in a mass October sit-in time to highlight how the 1960s president election campaign had ignored civil rights. The coordinated day of action took place on October 19th. King participated in a sit-in at that restaurant in Riches. Atlanta's largest department store was among the many arrested. The authorities released everyone over the next few days except for Dr. King, invoking his probationary plea deal that he had taken previously. In October 25th, to 4 months of hard labor. He was sentenced, all right? He got 4 months for this, okay? Because like I already mentioned, they had agreed to some plea deal where now he's in this system where he's stuck for, like they just mentioned, 4 months, all right? So King was transported to the Georgia State Prison. The arrest and harsh sentence drew nationwide attention. Many feared for King's safety as he started a sentence with people convicted of violent crimes, many white and hostile to his activism. Presidential candidates were asked to weigh in at a time when parties were courting the support of Southern whites and their political leadership, including Governor Vandiver. Nixon, with whom King had a closer relationship before, declined to make a statement despite a visit from Jackie Robinson requesting his intervention. All right. So Jackie Robinson, he goes and talks to Nixon. He says, hey, man, you got to get Martin out, bro. He in jail. What you going to do about it? And Nixon chose to not say a thing. He chose to stay out of it and didn't want any parts of it. Okay. So look, John F. Kennedy was the governor at the time, and he enlisted his brother to exert more pressure on state authorities, and at the request of Sergeant Shiver, called for King's wife to offer his help. The pressure from Kennedy and other provided effected for King's release 2 days later. King's father decided to openly endorse Kennedy's candidacy for the November 8th election, which he narrowly won. All right. So look, there was a lot of political posturing behind Martin Luther King getting arrested and being convicted over a prior probationary period. He was in jail for 4 months and sentenced to a Georgia State prison, and like they said, which was a racist prison. So they were already concerned about his safety. He reaches out to Nixon. Nixon doesn't want to do anything, and this is at the time where he is going up against JFK. JFK comes in, offers his help, right? But he needed that because the constituents would say he needed the Black American vote. And naturally, a lot of Black Americans had the right to vote because of who? Dr. Martin Luther King. So, fast forward, he'd be able to win because of what? That swing vote based on who? The foundational Black American community. All right? It's that simple, man. This is still what happens today. A lot of these politicians will align themselves and posture themselves towards our needs to make sure that they get that bump in the votes that's necessary. Unfortunately, nowadays, Black Americans are much more particular about who we want to choose and who we want to align ourselves with, because now more than ever, we have seen and experienced the fact that Black Americans, specifically foundational Black Americans, have no allies in this. And so we are now making sure that we are doing our due diligence to look at every single thing that any politician comes up here speaking on behalf of Black Americans or speaking on behalf of foundational Black Americans. We are going out of our way to make sure that we are paying attention to what they're saying and what they're bringing to the table, because it is very important moving forward, right? Now is the time. This has been a time for us as Black Americans to make sure that we are gatekeeping, and we're making sure that we are holding every single politician, every single person who is a congressman and woman to their job. If you are not helping our cause, get out of the way so we can get somebody in there who does. Ain't no negotiations. It's looking out for us or you out. Literally. I don't have to go back and forth about this, man. And the nerve of these people. This fool came in here talking about that Dr. King ain't FBA. What a fool. All right. After the October 19th sit-ins, the following unrest, a 30-day truce, all right? A 30-day truce was declared in Atlanta for desegregation negotiations. However, the negotiations failed and the sit-ins and boycotts resumed for several months. That's why I be trying to tell y'all, foundational Black Americans got to stay on code, all right? If other people are going through stuff, it's not our business if it does not involve us and what benefits us. We stand out of it. We got to stay on code as long as it takes. I don't care how long it takes. I'm here. I'm chilling until it's time for us to make sure that it's our turn to get out here and do what we got to do. And it is not an incentivized. There is no plan for us. You know what I'm saying? I'm focused on me, bro. I got to make sure my business stay afloat. I got to make sure that I'm staying controlled in my own endeavors. You feel me? The things that I want to do. I don't got time for you, this BS, man. Y'all can sit out here and play these games like you want to, but I'm just being real with y'all. It ain't really no real discrepancies here. There's really no discrepancies, man. All right, so not woke 6670. Hey, man, I'm getting just the craziest people in the chat today. All right, so let's hear it. Democrats favor oligarchs, and the largest donor is George Soros, 40%, all M words in the U.S. Districts of Soros backed. Democrats have always known the plantation requires violence. Listen, bro, I think we make it clear here on Elite Media that when it comes to political parties, we hold everybody accountable. I don't care if you're Democrat. I don't care if you're Republican. I don't care if you're part of an independent. If you are not specifically working in the interest of the American people, if you are not particularly working in the interest of foundational Black Americans, I do not care what you're on. I will hold you accountable. We don't do that over here. We don't do that. Oh, this party do this and this party do that, because both parties are both on some BS. We ain't finna come over here and try to just blame one side when they're both working together. What we not finna do is try to make it seem like both of these parties ain't making it hard for all Americans. That's what we not gonna do. Because guess what, Mr. Not Woke 6070, whatever? You need to understand that all these parties are working together to make it hard for all of us as Americans. I don't got time to be playing games where y'all not thinking larger than just one party or the other party, playing the blame game. Wake up, bro. Wake up, bro. You got to wake up, man. You got to stop being so small-minded. You got to stop thinking that, oh, it's just one party, bro. No, it's both parties working together collectively. Whether you know it or not, let me give you a little bit of some ideas. These people come from the same places. They hang out in the same spots. They congregate and go to the same organizations. Don't come on here trying to talk about one and you not willing to talk about the other. We gonna hold everybody accountable over here. We ain't gonna let nobody off the hook. Everybody who has participated in white supremacy and helping create and hold up the white power structure, it does not matter their party. They are Democrats, they are Republicans, they are independents, moderates, all of them. I'm not finna play these games. Don't come on my channel trying to play them games, because you're gonna get cooked every single time. Not Woke 670 talking about the Democrats. Bro, if you don't wake up and look at everybody, everybody's the enemy. Nobody is safe. Everybody gets the same smoke. We do not allow anybody to be off the hook. Everyone must be held accountable. Everyone. Okay? So when I speak on Dr. Martin Luther King and the things that he's been through, All right. How he spoke about what was owed to us. Okay. How he spoke about what we were supposed to be doing. Come on, man. You can't deny an icon, bro. An icon, dog. An icon, bro. Y'all sat up here and tried to, make it seem like there was a time where these dudes don't even know history, y'all. And that's why I had to make sure that I came up here and I brought it right to y'all. I didn't want to make it anything that could be confused, anything that could be lost in translation. I wanted to make it clear that when I speak about Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., the icon who was a hero to me and many people like me, I will make sure that I read off the history and the understanding of how they sabotage and use propagandist rhetoric to try their best to dismantle the movement, what he was representing and what he did for us. Nah, we're going to take our time to make sure that we document and we make sure that we are giving you guys the facts, no sugarcoating it, because that's what he is due. He deserves that. He is the one who did everything, who went out there and helped us become what we became today. All right. And so once he started to do that, like we're gonna fast forward, right? They assassinated him. So this right here, this little speech is from 1968. This is right before they took him out, okay? This was right before there was a real assassin, when they really got him, okay? And he passed away on April 4th, 1968. Rest in peace, okay? So look, this is what he had to say right before he was unalived. Listen to this, guys.
At the very same time that America refused to give the Negro any land, through an act of Congress, our government was giving away millions of acres of land in the West and the Midwest, which meant that it was willing to undergird its white peasants from Europe with an economic floor. But not only did they give the land, they built land grant colleges with government money to teach them how to farm. Not only that, they provided county agents to further their expertise in farming. Not only that, they provided low interest rates in order that they could mechanize their farms. Not only that, today many of these people are receiving millions of dollars in federal subsidies not to farm, and they are the very people telling the black man that he ought to lift himself by his own bootstraps. And this is what we are faced with. And this is a reality. Now, when we come to Washington, in this campaign, we are coming to get our check.
All right. So anybody who had any type of understanding here, why would he speak on these things? Oh, that's right, because that is part of his lineage. That's who he is, right? Coming for a check. Enough, right? Enough with the propaganda, enough with the assassination of my character, enough with y'all not doing what you're supposed to do for foundational Black Americans. Nah, on this next campaign, we coming for a check. All right? And after that, what happened? He ain't make it. They made sure he didn't make it because that message is so powerful, because they cannot deny that message. No one can deny that message, that what is owed to foundational Black Americans is something that we deserve. They cannot deny that. So it is on us to make sure that we continue to hold up the legacy of our ancestors who fought so hard for this, who their last dying wish, okay, his last agenda was this, coming for a check. We got unfinished business. We got unfinished business, y'all. We got unfinished business with these people. We got unfinished business, and that's why I'm not playing with y'all when it comes to this reparations talk. We got unfinished business. This was something that our ancestors was coming for. They were coming for it. All right. We ain't just come out of nowhere talking about this stuff. This is something that they were coming for actively. So there's no way that we're not going to get ours, bro. There's no way that we're not going to be out here focused on what needs to be focused on, because we got to get it, y'all. We not playing, bro. Y'all thought that it was just a game, bro. And then now look. We're going to play this one more time before we get out of here, man, because this is just, it's a profound speech, man. He just this is why he was who he was. This is why he was him. You feel me?
At the very same time that America refused to give the Negro any land, through an act of Congress, our government was giving away millions of acres of land in the West and the Midwest, which meant that it was willing to undergird its white peasants from Europe with an economic floor. But not only did they give the land, they built land grant colleges with government money to teach them how to farm. Not only that, they provided county agents to further their expertise in farming. Not only that, they provided low interest rates in order that they could mechanize their farms. Not only that, today, many of these people are receiving millions of dollars in federal subsidies not to farm, and they are the very people telling the black man that he ought to lift himself by his own bootstraps. This is what we are faced with, and this is a reality. Now, when we come to Washington in this campaign, we are coming to get our check.
I mean, you can't say it no better than that, y'all. I told you guys that from my perspective, all things come to the top. Everybody has a time in their life. Everybody has some divine intervention. This is what it is, man. I love, you feel me, history. I'm very, very real about when it comes to this. I don't really care about if this gets a bunch of views, if there's a bunch of people in the chat. I don't care about that. This is about me making sure that I pay my respects to someone that I respect and look up to, that I have my entire life tried my best to emulate and to be able to speak out openly against what things that bother me and what bothers us as foundational Black Americans. And so naturally, I'm gonna hop on here and do this right here on this platform. You know what I'm saying? This is what we gotta do, bro. It's Martin Luther King Day. Did y'all think I wasn't gonna come on here and have a stream about MLK? You crazy, bro. You crazy, man. This is what we do. We love history. We love to bring facts. We love to make sure that people stand on code, man. Because this is what it's about, bro. This is about growth within our community. This is about growth within our people. This is about growth within our friends, man. Salute to all the new subscribers, man. Everybody who's been subscribing, man, we've been growing crazy over these last couple of days. You know, many of people have been following and subscribing, man. So keep it up, guys. We are trying to reach 1,000 subscribers. We almost there, man. Really, really appreciate everybody who shows love and supports this channel. We're going to grow it. We're going to make sure that we respect our elders here, and we're going to make sure that we respect our lineage, all right? Because that's what we do here. It's all about history. It's all about respect. It's all about facts. You know what I'm saying? So we're going to make sure we stick to those, you know what I mean? Those are the principles of what I wanted to create with my platform, what I wanted to create with my channel. It's all about facts. It's all about history. It's all about making sure that you're doing the right thing, standing on something, having a backbone. You dig? So salute to everybody out there. Make sure you guys like and subscribe, man. I appreciate everyone who shows love, man. You guys have been nothing but supportive, and the numbers continue to grow. So, hey, I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing. Y'all just keep supporting your boy. We going to make it, man. Salute to everybody, man. Thank you so much. My name is Brandon B, and I'm out. Peace.